Many of us responded immediately after Jamia. We were at the police stations that night. A whole bunch of people gathered in front of the police station through the night. And that was what sparked off a whole nationwide series of protests in solidarity, initially with the students of Jamia and AMU, and leading on to the much larger questions of the defense of our constitution itself. But we felt that we needed to really understand what happened in AMU. And please understand, the events of AMU happened on 15th night. We were there by the 17th. And so we were there very soon after. But in this short period of time, the university had cleared out, the university administration had cleared out around 21,000 students in the course of this small period. It was clear that they just didn't want them around because they thought that that would quell the protests. There's students there from Kashmir and from the northeast. There's students who are poor. The administration said we did organize buses for them. There were women students. But by the time we reached, most of the students had already been flushed out, I would say, from the university. But I would give credit to the faculty of AMU, who were very concerned and wanted to stand in solidarity. So we had a very unusual, because we went at short notice, but they told us that in their staff club, they have gathered, and we found almost 100 teachers waiting for us. And from them, we heard a lot of what unfolded. We also met a number of students, but every one of them was so terrified and made sure that, that we would retain their anonymity. The reasons for their fear was that they had been told in completely uncertain terms, and this was told to us over and over again, that if they complain, they would be removed or expelled from the university, and also criminal charges like under the NSA would be filed against the students. And the students were therefore completely terrified and unwilling to come on record. We also went to the hospital and met students who were injured, and we met a lot of the doctors. The doctors were saying they're the only set of people who have not been cleared out of the campus because the hospital had to run based on the interns and the registrars, and they were a source of information as well. After me, two other members, the more senior members of the team, John Dayal and Natasha Badwar, would also briefly share some findings. But we wanted on this panel to get a set of people to comment on what they saw. Mr. Chaman Lal is one of our most respected retired police officers who's stood by the defense of human rights at every stage. We have Saida Hamid, who has a very long emotional association with Aligarh Muslim University. We have Atul Sood, who actually, we could not get the faculty from Aligarh. They did not also want to be named and mentioned. But Atul has been coordinating the solidarity, as I would say, of the teachers of JNU with the students there. And we felt we'd like to hear his word. And finally, Geeta Hariharan. Geeta's two colleagues had also accompanied us from the Indian Cultural Forum. And I would request her to finally sum up. That's how we do this quick afternoon. I want to just start with 2 or 3 broad observations. I've been in the IAS. I've seen a lot of law and order situations in universities and outside. I have never seen anything like what I saw in Aligarh. I have never seen a university administration which so abandons its students to a state which is clearly as I wrote, pitiless and brutal to the students. I was amazed to find that a serving IPS officer of the UP cadre of 2006 batch is appointed as the registrar. And he's going to go back after his deputation to the same police administration led by Mr. Adityanath. And his attitude when we spoke to him was extraordinarily casual, pro-police, and with no sense of solidarity with the students. I'll talk about two students whose memories will stay with me. One of them we met on his hospital bed. This was just 17th morning. On 15th night, his hand had got blown off and amputated. The kind of equanimity and grace he showed was something that I don't think I could have mustered in his place. His only concern at that stage was, how will I let my mother know and will she survive this? He said that he saw tear gas shells, and they had been told that if you pick up a tear gas shell and throw it on water, its impact will get reduced. So he was trying to do that. It turned out to be something else which exploded in his hand. And the registrar himself spoke very casually that the police used stun grenades. I know stun grenades is something that explodes with huge noise and burst of light, which stuns you into for a period. It's normally something that you use against terrorists, or very dangerous criminals when you're trying to get to them. I have never heard of it being used against civilian populations, least of all against students. And the second instance that I wanted to just talk about was about a young boy of 19 who came to us very frightened. But he was describing, he was a day scholar. He was trying to rush back through all of this melee to his home. The police picked him up. And he described his hand was broken by the police lathis. And he said they kept twisting his arm to cause him more pain. He talked about a number of communal slurs being used. He talked about communal slurs being used by the police throughout their detention. He talked about being stripped naked with the other boys and beaten with a belt. He had welt marks of being beaten across his body, which he showed us. Many students and teachers spoke about the Rapid Action Force actually raising slogans of Jai Shri Ram, running like a rampaging mob, burning scooters, burning property, chasing students. They also chased them. They ran wherever they could, and through terror of about 3 or 4 hours. One group of students spoke to me and said that they just ran into the mosque and were hiding for all of those hours behind the curtains, just hoping that nobody would find them. Somebody else went into the guest house. Some ran into hostels. They were chased into the hostels. We saw the room where the 3 boys were inside their own room, and they fired into it. I don't know whether it was tear gas shells, but it could have been the stun grenade because their room caught fire. And it was like you hole out terrorists, that kind of action. It reflects the attitude of the state administration to students. It is something they could never have done even in JNU. And there is something about how they're treating higher institutes of higher learning, which are seen as identified with with the Muslim community. They could not have done this anywhere else. They could not have thought they could get away with it. And we felt we needed to prepare this report and also to say this clearly, because they should not be allowed to get away with it. We need to know. I'm sure that everything that we have said in this report will be contested, and therefore I've given a caveat that I alone take personal responsibility for everything that is stated in this report. If anyone has to take any action, they'll have to take action. I think the most contested question, and I'll leave it at that, is whether there was violence by the students which set this off, or whether it was unprovoked. It's hard to reach a final conclusion about it. I'm told Republic TV is just at this time repeatedly carrying pictures of violence by the Aligarh students. My answer to that is that even if there was violence, what the police did was completely disproportionate, and there has to be a proportionality of response. There has to be restraint. This is what we are always taught. And particularly when you're dealing with civilian populations, particularly when you're dealing, even more so when you're dealing with students in universities. So even if there was any violence like stone throwing by students, which we cannot verify, none of that justifies the scale and the nature of the police response and the response of the RAF that followed this.
Two universities being targeted, both with the name Muslim, is something which we need to think about. We also need to think about that Aligarh is a university where the Vice Chancellor was Dr. Zakir Hussain. Dr. Zakir Hussain, whose house is located right in the heart of Jamia, even today. I also live in Jamia. I live in Jamia, and in a sense, I also live in Aligarh. And I also have, even last month, I was in that very guest house where some students were hiding, that you wrote about in your report, where I had gone to do a commemorative lecture on Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, who said Aligarh was the markaz of Indian Renaissance. So basically, I'm here because of my historical memory and the fact that in Aligarh, the staff of Aligarh, the teachers of Aligarh stood solidly behind the students. So, as Natasha said, Muslims, because of their dress, and I don't know what my dress is, I've always worn this dress, I've never worn anything which distinguished me in a sense or was a marker, but Muslims are the number one target across this country. And everybody, Natasha, you rightly said, and John and Harsh has been behind it. It has to be that entity has to be now looked at with different eyes. Even as you're getting tweets from your friends who are being photographed and videoed by the security forces. As far as registrar, being a retired IPS or a serving IPS officer, Jamia also has a registrar who's, I think, probably a retired IPS officer of the Himachal cadre. But whenever I call him, he never even answers my phone through all this. I also want to say that when Harsh said that I have never seen what I saw in Aligarh, I remember that it was 2002 that you decided that you were going to resign from your service as an IAS officer. And what you have seen in 2002 and what you have seen in Aligarh, I think those eyes have seen a lot that we need to learn from. The hand blown, the broken hand, the twisting of broken bones, the fact that stun grenades were hurled, the fact that students hid both in Jamia and in Aligarh in toilets, in guest houses, in girls' hostels. There is a long story that hangs there. Institutes of higher learning identified with Muslims was what Harsh said. And I think that is where we need to look at Aligarh. And we also need to know that there is internationally, there is a very strong Aligarh alumni across the world, and Adib Bhai knows about them, all over the world. And there is now a demand that there should be action, the Vice-Chancellor should resign. I've got a lot of mails from Aligarh alumni in all parts of the world which want action to be taken. And I have to say, I'm going to end here, but I'm going to say that this is a very expressive, very moving, extremely well-written report, which has a lot of veracity and shows a lot of tenacity on the part of the team that had gone, who had investigated. And I think if not for this report, Aligarh would have remained something which would have ultimately faded in the public memory. But this report is going to make sure that we don't forget the fact that Aligarh has been the target. Aligarh has been the target as all Muslim institutions have been targeted. But the tragedy of Aligarh is that from within Aligarh, the highest decision-making authority, the highest office, was not able to respond.
I and Professor Nandini Sundar took time off from when Harsh and the team were talking to the staff council in the hall. We went and met in the fortified building that is the administration of AMU. We went to meet the Vice-Chancellor. He was not there, we were told. He had been summoned by the visitor, that is the President of India, and had come to Delhi. In retrospect, it was a lie. And he was just trying to avoid us. He knew we were coming. So we did meet the registrar, a serving Indian Police Service officer of the 2007 batch, who was going to become a DIG in February or March 2020, and is eagerly looking forward to his promotion. The current serving superintendent of Aligarh is his immediate senior in service. They're chums. The Vice-Chancellor himself, we were told, is very close to the administration, and in fact had invited the DG and the IGP of the range to visit the university some time ago, some months ago, not a long time ago. So that's the general matter. But when we were talking to the policeman, our oblique registrar, apart from his arrogance, we asked him, who asked the police inside the campus? Did you? Or did the Vice-Chancellor? He says the Vice-Chancellor has authorized me to call in the police. Nandini and I repeatedly asked him, and he was firm on his reply, that he was deputed, or the responsibility had been delegated upon him. Secondly, because we knew the case of the boy, a young man whose hand had been blown off, we asked him what sort of a weapon was that. Could it have been a tear gas shell that explodes? It happens once in a while. He was firm. He's a serving IPS officer. He says it was a stun grenade. Repeatedly we asked him, stun grenades, where? Do you bring in stun grenades into a university? But he was firm. So when we write stun grenade in this report, it is straight from the mouth of the person who, in a way, authorized that. And from there, I would like to add a few sentences to what Harsh has already said. It is this militarization of the response that I would like to comment on. I think we have gone far beyond the lathi charge. Severe as it is, I've faced lathi charges and have been in hospital myself long years ago. It's gone beyond water cannon, which is also disastrous if it hits you in the belly. It has gone beyond tear gas, which can blind you, which can also, if it hits you in the belly at close range, kill you. Here you're using stun guns, stun grenades, which are normally you see on CNN, where they use stun grenades into bunkers to flush out terrorists of the ISIS or something of that sort. It makes a flash, the ear-splitting noise can burst your eardrums, and you have no option but to come out. And then they catch you or shoot you or lathi charge you or whatever as they have in mind. And at this militarization which we saw and read about elsewhere, the immediate use of guns on innocent, unarmed people is something that is horrendous and needs to be condemned by just about everybody. The sanctity of the campus. It doesn't, the word picture isn't very clear. One door is here and the other gate is there. Kilometers almost, you would say, between the two. For them to enter jeep or whatever and go into the hostel, a very ancient building, go into the rooms and do this stun gunning inside. Well, where could be the need? Who were they chasing? Enemy forces or what? The staff themselves were not very secure. And this also I thought I should spell out. Largely, I personally would not want to say something is less violent than something is more violent. JNU, Aligarh, what has happened in Delhi, in Jama Masjid, in Daryaganj, all of them stand at that level beyond expectations, beyond tolerance, and certainly, therefore, beyond acceptance by any civil society. And please understand, even when they are so-called detaining you, it is not a very pleasant experience. That I tell you from my own experience.
This was my second visit to Aligarh Muslim University. I had gone there a couple of years ago. My husband is alumni of AMU. He spent 6 years of his youth there. And I had gone there with my family. It was like a weekend picnic, traveling, walking all over the campus. It had been empty when I had gone there 5 years ago. It was still empty, but the atmosphere had completely changed. This visit was like visiting the ruins of a university, in a sense. There was so much eeriness, so much silence, so much desolation, and such despair, both in the eyes and faces of the teachers who had seen it being destroyed in front of them, in the eyes of the students, some of whom from Assam and Kashmir did not have the means or the destination to be able to leave the campus so far, so they were skulking around. In the silence of the women who were sitting at the gate, women students who were sitting near the gate that had been, it had been put back in place after the police had broken it on the 15th. There were 20 women students sitting on the footpath. Most of them, some of them had dupattas on their mouth. Some of them had just tied something on their mouth. It was a silent protest in the cold, in this isolation, not knowing if there is anybody who is going to come to lend a hand, who is going to come to look at them, who is going to come to listen to their protest or witness what they are going through. They were still sitting there. We entered in the early afternoon, we left at night, and they were still there, quietly sitting there in protest, knowing that they will be targeted, knowing that this campus has seen violence, it can see it again. They still had the courage and the bravery to sit through, to say, we will continue to be here, you can come for us if you want. It was really an extraordinary experience. I think most of us, as we listened to the teachers, we heard the proctor, we heard the violence in their language, in their attitude, in their body language when they took on people like Harsh Mandar to say, don't tell us how we are supposed to behave on our own campus. And they had to be reminded that he's a senior ex-IS officer who has seen similar stuff, who has dealt with situations before. The atmosphere in the hospital where we went into the ICU ward. There were 2 students, one of them broke down at the sight of the support that we were offering him, and 2 of them in the burns wards, where one had lost his hand and the other had lost some fingers. So in a way, at some point in the day, most of us became too stunned to feel anything. We became too numb. And it was in the recalling when we began to take phone calls after we came out of the university, out of the city, and our phones came into range, and people were able to reach us again. It was then when we were beginning to answer, some of us got calls from colleagues, from journalists, from family members, that we began to find the words to express, we began to even experience or feel the horror of what we had witnessed. It was really in the recalling that the words came to us, कि एक university को बर्बाद कर दिया है. How will the sense of belonging that students have for the universities that nurture them ever be restored after the kind of violence that has been perpetrated on the students in broad daylight, in the knowledge of the whole world? How will that sense of belonging ever be restored? How will AMU become AMU again is a question that we are really left with. And what I also want to say is that what we saw in Aligarh Muslim University, what we had seen live on our Twitter and Facebook feeds, on social media as well as mainstream media on the Sunday when Jamia University was attacked by police personnel. Aligarh does not have enough videos to offer us to show us what the students were doing before the police entered, but Jamia does. They were sitting in the library. Yeah, there were students trying to save themselves because they were getting asthma attacks from the tear gas, and they were still being attacked. There is a library still standing in Jamia that is completely destroyed because tear gas shells were thrown inside. We have videos of women students in the washroom being attacked, hostels attacked. So these were not students who were in any way being violent. A couple of days ago, when the lathi charge happened in Delhi, the whole day, citizens, many of whom are in the room here, were coming to Mandi House, coming to Jantar Mantar, coming to Lal Killa, being picked up in buses, detained. Yes, that was humiliation enough. When did the lathi charge start? When daylight began to dim. And where did the lathi charge happen? At Delhi Gate, at Daryaganj, targeting a particular community. So we are really witnessing a new kind of riot. This is representatives of the state against the people of India in almost every instance that we are watching. And we are standing with bated breath every day on our WhatsApp. We get a message from somebody or the other, violence expected in Shaheen Bagh, come there. So people like us, people of privilege in the big cities who have a voice, who have platforms where we can speak, this is a time when all of us have to put ourselves physically, psychologically, emotionally, as a body between the community that is being targeted, the students who are being targeted, and the state, which is really not going to stop before they have got what Adityanath said, badla lenge, their vengeance for having called them out. So this is not a one instance of violence that this press conference is about, not one location of violence that this press conference is about. We are really here to communicate to each other, to understand that we are in a very historic moment in independent India. Lakhs of people are coming out in every city that we hear of. Everybody is surprised by it. We are all, there's a little bit of a sense of disbelief, how long will it last? But we now know that we have to make it last long enough. As I was sitting here, colleagues are sending me photos from the rally outside where policemen are videotaping the faces of every protester out there. These people are going to be targeted, and we have to continue to stand and speak and put ourselves in front of them so that they do not face the kind of violence that Aligarh Muslim University has already had to face and had to suffer, and the students of Jamia and Delhi University and all over India, and the minority community, the Muslim communities that are being targeted in UP right now as we stand here. People are being arrested, they're being picked up from their homes, properties are being destroyed, the videos are coming in constantly. So this is a moment of great vigilance that needs action from all of us.
I've started feeling that I wasted so many years over being part of a family whose real picture is coming out. I have gone through the brief report, I've heard from others. I don't have to say anything other than that there's no doubt that it is massive, gross violation of the rights of their students. The fact that the university invited police is significant. The fact that a serving IPS officer is the registrar is significant. I always say that what ails police is politicization, criminalization, communalization. There's an example of politicization where there's a nexus. I never felt that there was an interference. It's a nexus between politicians and overambitious civil servants, particularly police. And this practice of posting, appointing the IPS officers in such, the idea is that they want to police the university, the policing of the university. Why should they have a police officer otherwise? Second, police has the monopoly over use of force. No other agency has got that monopoly. But it is very clearly stated in the code of conduct, which people don't refer to that it has to be the last resort when all other options have been exhausted. And what are those options? We teach them that they should first advise, persuade, warn, and then use it. And when it's a question of using force, the principle is the minimum necessary force. There is no doubt about it. No, but it has become maximum available force. And the account about this incident, it makes it very clear that the use of force. Use of force, whether it is under normal circumstances like Aligarh, or it is warlike situation, or even the difficult situations of conflict zones, has to be supported by two principles. Principles of necessity, as I said, that it became necessary to use force, and proportionality, that the use force has to be in proportion with the threat. And the threat they feel has to be an imminent threat, has to be a specific threat, not the idea, as somebody said it, and a very responsible person from UP has said, using the word badla, revenge. You see, that is what is most disturbing. And I feel disturbed over militarization, only simple militarization of the administration. You call BSF, CRPF, etc., they come as aid to the state power. They come as aid to the police. Now police itself is militarized. See the uniform, that guerrilla warfare uniform, that fatigues. They are wearing that in Dehradun, they are wearing that in Delhi. And that shows a mindset, and that mindset, the military mindset, where torture becomes routine, where civil authority is undermined. These are far more serious things which have to be addressed. Use of, or even threat of use of NSA, they can go to that extent. All this is being done in the name of public order. But what is public order? Public order is a natural outcome of good governance and good policing. And what they are trying to create is police order. Public order is not police order. And we have made public order as police order. Despite being police officer, I felt that it is possible to police this country despite all the constraints in a legal way. Justice Verma, my mentor, who was I was in NHRC for 11 years. He was the chairman of the NHRC and former CG. I used to say that you do all the reforms, infrastructure, legislation, logistic, but what is needed is a reform that deals with the infirmities that we suffer from, the mental attitude that we suffer from. And that is, it is very unfortunate that we still feel we are controlling the subjects of a colonial empire. What is needed is to serve the citizens of a democratic republic. Until this day. So everybody talks about reform these days, it's fashionable. But reformation is not modernization, as modernization is not Westernization. Reformation is about reform in the culture and management of police, and that is what happening. The unfortunate thing is that everybody is against this kind of reform. One can understand politicians don't want it. Bureaucrats don't want it. Police officers don't want it. Because most of them, they feel very happy and comfortable with all that ails police because they can use that to their advantage. People are also not pragmatic. People are also not asserting that the way they should do it. 1903 Commission had said the police is perceived in this country as corrupt, brutal, callous, poorly trained, poorly supervised. All that applies to the police we have now here. And the type of brutality that we have seen here now, say that, how can a democratic country which claims to be governed by rule of law can allow this kind of things? And this use of word is revenge, because I'll conclude by saying that ultimately what is required is to enforce the code of conduct. And people must assert it, that the police must follow. Police job is not just to control crime and investigate cases. It is to uphold the rights of the people. Because what has been promised in the Constitution, in the preamble, who is going to operationalize it? For operationalization of this kind of thing, you need a police that is professional, that is non-partisan, that is efficient, and that kind of reform. And in that kind of reform, the police must be made to understand. They must acknowledge and respect the limitations on their functions and powers. And that is where the society has also to cooperate. That this feeling that we can do anything, and this is the nexus between politicians and police, where everything is possible, everything is being done, has to be stopped. And that is where we have to be very vigilant, because this is one incident, more and more incidents will occur until we address the basic issues of having democratic policing, and policing where police officers follow not only the legal laws, etc., but also matters of code of conduct.
Before I say something, I wanted to underline that the fact that civil society has to come out with these reports, itself shows how the institutions have collapsed in this country, because now we no longer hope that there will be any inquiry by the state which will bring out the truth behind such kind of brutalization and militarization that we have experienced. So now the situation has arisen that the civil society themselves have to come up with these reports, because the justice framework and the law and order framework is not something which has the faith of every citizen of India. That itself is a worrisome concern. As Harsh said in the beginning, I was not part of the team that went to conduct this fact-finding. So I'd just like to make 2-3 points for the consideration of this House and for our general thinking. We are witnessing a situation of communalization, militarization, and brutalization. These three elements are evident, I want to underline, not only in the society or in our country, but also, I would say, in the institutions of higher education. I want to underline that the fact that AMU and Jamia is targeted, apart from the communal aspect of it, is also important to underline that the institutions of higher learning are the biggest target of this state. Why they are and why that is being done, that's an issue for a separate debate. But we need to underline today that institutions, so young people, the teaching learning processes that has happened in universities over the last 15 to 20 years are raising questions which really undermine the contemporary power structures, and therefore higher education in particular is a big target of these states and the actors of the state, and we need to underline this. Why in the society there is this communalization, brutalization, and militarization? That's something that all of you understand much more than me. This is not the moment to really see why we have reached the point where we have reached. I just want to bring two aspects other than the why aspect, which I have not elaborated. How this is being sustained. That is, how this brutalization, militarization is being sustained is very important to understand, because unfortunately I have to confess, this is not going to be the last incident. We're going to see much more of it in the coming days and months. So the machinery and the mechanism and the processes which sustain this communalization, which sustain this militarization and sustain this brutalization are important to understand and underline. Once again, this is again not the occasion to really go into detail, but I would again say three things about this sustenance. One, the notion of the use of power has been systematically reconstructed over the last many years. And there is this instrumental use of power. Power to sustain power is something that has been rationalized completely over time. So use of power for public good has been given up as a notion in whatever frameworks of governance, politics, and the larger institutional context that we have. And we need to understand why that has happened, what are the factors that are behind it. The second that I want to say is that the notion of what is socially just has also been reconstructed in the society and in this country over the last many years. And the sustenance of such brutalization is done because of what has been sort of reconstructed as socially just, helps it facilitate and push it further. What are the mechanisms that has been put in place to reconstruct what is socially just? Like in the first case when I said that might is right has been established. Similarly, what is socially just has been completely reconstructed in a manner where it is not necessary that those who are deprived, marginalized, and at the receiving end of the powers that be are the ones for which the society has to defend, or the powers that are in, people who are in power need to defend. It's very much now being legitimized through various mechanisms that that it is not necessarily that we stand with them, rather we can stand with the powerful, we can stand with the aspirational class, we can stand with those who are dominating or who are brutalizing the society rather than those who are being brutalized. That is being systematically done over the last many years. The third I want to underline, which many of the colleagues who spoke here talked about, that the institutional framework of governance of higher education and education in general has been completely compromised over the last many decades. And it is the outcome of that process that when such situations arise, that the institutional framework caters to the needs of the powers that be. That is, it facilitates the brutalization, it facilitates this communalization rather than the inverse. So this is something that has been happening over the years in the way institutional frameworks are being constructed. And the key element of the institutional framework is that there is no accountability of any kind, whether to the institutions and mechanisms of processes within the institutions of higher education or outside to the public at large. And this is going to increase immensely more in the coming days, months, and weeks, once the new framework of education that we are going to all see is going to be implemented in this country. So this complaint that we have today, that the registrar did not do this, that the vice chancellor did not do this, we will not be in a position to even make this complaint. Because in the institutional framework, they will no longer be accountable to the stakeholders of the university. They will be accountable to the powers that be. That's how the institutional framework is to be implemented. So, when we are talking about this militarization and brutalization, and of communalization, the larger processes in society and also the processes in higher education, which we may have underlined over the years, but have not sufficiently resisted it. Why I am saying all this is also because where do we go from here? There are two dimensions to it. One is to deal with the current crisis, and the other is to somehow find ways so that we do not experience it again. And it's the second part which requires addressing these larger set of questions that we do not experience this in the future. What do we do now in the immediate context? It's a very strange order of things. Assuming, I've been part of all that has gone on in Delhi, including at the police headquarters, the negotiation with police at the police station, been part of the experience of lathi charge, having been beaten by the police. It's very interesting that the police does all this individually to us as well as collectively, in the name of providing us security. And there is this argument being made. And you know, the police PRO in Delhi is very fond of making this argument. So they are saying that we are doing it in order to defend you. Why, how is that rationalized? It's being rationalized by saying that there are some elements who want to disrupt the peaceful processes. There has been no inquiry, no accountable, whatever, transparent methods of convincing us who was part of it, who wasn't. Neither they know it nor we know it. But without identifying anyone, they can rationalize all their actions. And this has been built in the system for the reasons I said earlier of how over time we have reconstructed what is just, what the power is to be used for, and what is the kind of institutional frameworks we promote. So this is a situation where, it just gave you this small example, everything is being rationalized because we have created conditions of creating this new common sense in which the use of such force, the communalization of the society can all be rationalized in the name of this common sense that we have constructed. So therefore, I think that this is an occasion not only to seek justice on each of these incidents for all those who have suffered, we should also press hard for changing the institutional frameworks within which the context has been created that we are experiencing such unfortunate incidents. And I'm sorry to say that I slightly differ that AMU and Jamia has been targeted for the obvious reason because this is those who are in power are Hindu fascists, but you would see similar experiences across the board in not only universities which are associated with minorities, but much more broad-based. So I slightly disagree with Harsh when he says JNU will not experience it. It will be a matter of time. JNU will also experience it. So this is not going to stop. This is actually a far powerful force where they experiment at one point, then use the experiment and the lessons from there to apply it at a more larger context. Where the resistance is going to be larger, those places will be experimented a bit later, where they expect less resistance, and when they can club it into some other framework, they are going to initially try it.
Let me summarize not only what we've heard here today, but what we've been seeing with our own eyes, on television, in newspapers, through friends, over the last 1 month, one could say. Perhaps we should say 1 year, perhaps we should say 2 years, and go on and on. Our brave youth, students and otherwise, have actually shown us what it is to have courage, what it is to have endurance, what it is to have that wonderful thing that human beings have had throughout history, solidarity. They have not come for you, perhaps. You have a particular name. You wear certain clothes, our Prime Minister tells us. Well, tomorrow they might come for you. And that is why solidarity keeps the human race going. But most important, I'm going to summarize by 3 or 4 very, very simple questions. Simple, but terribly important for us to address at this point and find answers and move on the basis of these answers, act on the basis of these answers. One is, what is a young person for? What is a student for? What is a university for? These are not facetious questions. A young person, all of us have families. Our lives, however old we are, would be impoverished without young people. Young people are there to show us what experiment is, what questioning is. They're not yet jaded. They will ask why. And that is why they are in the university. The point of the university, the point of being young, the point of being a student, the point of being a teacher is to say, ask as many questions as you want. And it's these questions which, with varying answers, will give them ideas, will give them language, which is important, which is learned. You know, we talk about students, were they violent? Well, I'm sorry, what are they learning in this university? They're learning the violence of language. They're learning real-life violence. They're learning war in a university war to win an argument, not words and ideas and arguments to disagree, to debate. That is the point of the university. Please, let's remember this. Let's not say students should be sheep. Let's not say the police have no role in the education of students. We've all brought up children without having police come into our homes. We've had difficult children who occasionally, siblings will say, we will kill the other person. It doesn't happen. This is just extended. This is all common sense, which is common wisdom. So, the university is a space which teaches all of us how to communicate. It does not flourish without argument. It does not flourish if you shut down the internet. It does not flourish if you say, we will withhold technology so you can't communicate with each other. What then, on the basis of this, I could ask the question, we're talking about the university as a space for doubt, disagreement, debate, questioning. How come we have universities like this? What is a constitution for? The constitution is there to give us certain rights, which again and again, let's repeat till we believe it, till we make it real. Equality, right to worship or not worship, and most of all, that freedom of speech. What does it mean? It includes the right to question, to disagree, to dissent. It does not mean that dissent in a constitutional democracy is dealt with lathi charge, stun grenades, all these new things we have learned from this fact-finding report. What is a citizen for? It is to claim these rights, which the Constitution gives the citizen. Which is why we don't want to talk about the son of the soil, or of course, nobody talks about daughters of the soil. The citizen, the human being. Finally, I'm just going to say, what is India for? It is to keep the diversity alive. And if we don't keep this diversity alive by insisting on a constitution that insists on our diversity, if we do not let our youth question and show us and indulge in debate and dialogue with our youth, we are going to lose all these, and we are actually going to find out the negative. What is a citizen not for? What is a university not for? And what are youth and students not for?
I'll just read out the quick executive summary that we have. In the light of reports of violent attacks on students by police and RAF personnel in the campus of Aligarh Muslim University, Uttar Pradesh, a fact-finding team of concerned civil society members, including lawyers, human rights workers, journalists, and academics, visited AMU on the 17th of December. As we began our fact-finding, many of those present agreed to speak to us, but only on the condition of anonymity. Their testimonies revealed that the university administration, district authorities, and state government not only failed in their duty to protect the campus and its residents against brutality by the UP police, but also that they in fact invited the police forces and their weapons into the campus. Apart from the breach of the discursive and educational space of the university, there were also significant unbridled human rights violations committed in AMU. The violence that was unleashed on the students has left many of them with shattered bones, grave injuries, deep bruises, and severe psychological trauma. The team was shocked to find that a serving police officer is appointed as registrar of the university. He justified the police action as both necessary and restrained, and even spoke casually of the forces using stun grenades. These are devices to temporarily blind and deafen the enemy, known sometimes to cause injury and burst into flames. They're only used in war situations or in militarized police actions such as against dangerous terrorists, never to quell student protests. However, the peacefully protesting students of AMU were attacked with such grenades, tear gas, sound bombs, and rubber bullets. While the violence was being let loose, even ambulances were attacked and threatened to stay away from injured students. Nearly 100 students have been injured in the process, about 20 critical. Students have had brain hemorrhage and have lost their hands in the process. Doctors strongly believe that most of the students who were attacked or detained have shown signs of the onset of PTSD. The police have also extensively used strong Islamophobic slurs in their attack, making it clear who their enemy really was. They have also been heard shouting Hindutva slogans while attacking the students and property on campus. Students who were picked up and detained by the police and RAF have reported that they faced extensive torture in custody, again of a communal nature. Internet and SMS services has been blocked out in Aligarh on the 15th night itself. It was restored only very recently. And under such circumstances, the nearly 21,000 residents of the university were forcefully evicted on 16th and loaded into substandard buses to undertake journeys of nearly 24 hours and more. Overall, the story which emerged was of a largely unprovoked violence in AMU, more brutal than even in Jamia, and indeed than in any university in recent history. Also, this is a story of a university administration which unconsciously abandoned its students and threw them to a hostile and pitiless state.